So this video, there is no pretense that this is going to be about libertarianism. I was specifically requested to make this video a few times by a longtime subscriber, and he thought that it would be really interesting, and I know that many of the people who are going to see this are going to not agree with that, and some of them are, but I figured what the hell. So in this video I want to discuss the gay network. Now, I use that term as a title not to define a specific group or an actual organization, but to describe a development that's happened within gay culture. And I think it's a development that has been going on for a very long time. Whenever you have a niche culture or you have a minority culture within a larger society, that there's going to be certain pressures and incentives that are going to potentially lead to a lot of integration within that subculture relative to the broader culture around it. And in this way, I don't think that gays are necessarily different from other parts of society. So, for instance, after World War II, we had a period, there's a famous book by the title Gay Metropolis, where you had, I mean, obviously there were homosexuals before World War II and there were homosexual communities, but you had large groups of them congregating in certain big urban cities, New York City, San Francisco, a few others. And these enclaves represented a disproportionate fraction of the homosexual population. If you lived out in Kansas or Nebraska or Ohio, very often you kind of saw your only real alternative if you were really interested in interacting with other gay men would be to move to one of these cities and to go to the bars and go to the clubs and go to the various other infrastructure facilities that catered to gay men. And as a result, you do kind of end up with like a much more tightly knit community, and instead of being spread more, it's not like the population at large is spread evenly over the country, but it's much more concentrated than it would be if you're just looking at where do all the gay people come from, because there's not more or less gay people in a rural or an urban setting. It's just that they're being drawn there. But technology has really kind of accelerated this. Now, everyone has access to the internet. Everyone has access to smartphones. Everyone has access to social networks like Facebook and YouTube and Reddit and all these cybernetic integrations of our society. But gays have them, and gays use them all the time. And gays use them in a way that crosses the cybernetic barrier a lot more readily, I think, than most of the other people out there who use them for whatever other reason. So, and I'm thinking here kind of like the king here, but it's only an example of a broader phenomenon is Grindr. Gay people, not all gay people use Grindr, by the way, so this isn't to generalize and say that that's the case, but there's a very high percentage of people who use Grindr or Tinder, or there's a whole bunch of other ones, Hornet and Scruff, Adam for Adam, and they're very interesting in the sense that most of these are based on proximity. So you can open up your phone and it will show all the other users of the app, which, as it turns out, is probably going to be a decent and perhaps even a majority of the gay population in the area. And it's fascinating because you don't have to go to a bar, you don't have to go to a club, you don't have to do anything, and you will not only be able to see other gay men around you, they will be able to see you and they'll be able to talk with you. And this, in a way, kind of heightens our awareness of each other's presence, where we are, what we're doing. And I mean, it's interesting, like when I travel, because a lot of I travel for work, and so I'll be driving across the country, and I might pass 10 miles or 20 miles from a town, and somebody in that town will see that I'm there and say, hey, what's up? And this means that, like, if you were a normal person and you were driving down the highway and you were to pass within 10 miles of somebody that you knew, but you wouldn't necessarily realize that was going on. Now, there are apps that do this. I think Facebook does this to some extent. And Facebook is another big part of this that I'll talk about in a second. But chances are you're not going to realize that you're close to them, but that is going to happen with Grindr or with Tinder or some of these other apps. So, uh, as an example, I was visiting Michigan maybe 5 years ago, and well, maybe 4 years ago, and I matched with a guy on Tinder, and we never met, but we chatted for a while, and we were pretty. There was a lot of mutual interest, but logistically we weren't able to meet, and so it didn't really go anywhere. Well, 3 4 years go by, and I'm at the gym in Manchester, New Hampshire, and this person hits me up on Grindr, and they say, "Hey, how are you doing?" And I look at him, and it's the same guy. Um, and he wasn't at my gym. He wasn't even in Manchester. He was in another part of New Hampshire, but not too far away. And because of the proximity fuse on this app, he was able to see me, and we reconnected just like that, even though there were miles between us, and there was no way. I mean, the odds that we would just by chance, like literally bump into each other would be very small. But the fact that we had um, this app, uh, this cyber connectivity, just instantly reconnected us. And it's been like when I go out west, I'll see people. Like when I would be working out west, I would see people who go to school here in New Hampshire, right? So they'd be students at Dartmouth or Yale or Harvard who would be going back to Billings or Sheridan or wherever, and they would open up their phone and be like, oh, I remember that guy from New Hampshire. So, and there we're talking about a radius of hundreds of miles, 200 300 miles that they can see you. Not uncommon. Normally, when I go out west, at some point, somebody I know will fly into Denver and they will be able to see me from Denver, even though that could, yeah, I think it's about 350, 400 miles away from where I am. But yeah, again, oh, what are you doing? I'm, somebody from Boston. And same thing happened when I went to Iceland. I'd go to Iceland and I would see people who I knew lived in Boston, who would be there on vacation. Like, oh, you're on vacation? Me too. Um, so there's that. Now, there's no reason that level of not that level of connectivity couldn't exist among the broader heterosexual world. But what's different is that the heterosexuals are less likely and less prone to translate that into a physical meeting, whatever that be. And obviously, when we're talking about gay men meeting, the implication, and it's not an unjustified one, is that is for sex or a hookup or some kind of sexual gratification between the two. Although not necessarily, gay men will meet and just have drinks or go on a date or hang out or be friends or whatever. There's all sorts of every type of networking you can think about happens. Also, it's just it's piggybacking to a large extent on this sexual access, and so yeah, you might post on Facebook that you're going to go to Toronto, let's say, but how many of your friends in Toronto are actually going to come out and meet you? Versus if you go to Toronto on your Grindr app, how many people in Toronto are going to meet? Well, you could probably meet more people than you'd have time to meet if you wanted to, right? If you want to, if you, and that's an interesting thing when you travel with these apps. You could probably travel essentially for free. Just go chat with people, and it will not take long before somebody's interested in meeting you. And whether it's a quid pro quo for sex or just a friendly interaction, and either one will work. You can get places to stay, you can get places to eat, you can get rides. Um, when I go to Iceland, I've never rented a car. I will go, and the people I know there will, hey, you're back, welcome back. Do you want to hang out? Sure, of course. Do you want to go get lunch? Do you want to? And I always try not to. This is me personally, but I don't even have to push, and offers will come to say, hey, well, if there's anything you want to see, if there's any sites, by all means, I can take you, blah blah blah. So um, and the sexual stuff. So there's a cliche that gays, and it's not just gays. There are heterosexual people who do this as well. Kind of have sex very flippantly, and there's a very low they hook up, and doesn't necessarily imply like a serious relationship or a serious friendship. And there's a lot of men who even explicitly say that they're into the abbreviation they use is NSA, which confused the fuck out of me when I first started. People would say, "Are you down for some NSA sex?" And I'd be like, "Like I hate the NSA. What are you talking?" No, no strings attached. Basically, people want to meet to have sex and not do anything else. Um, but even in that situation, you're meeting that person. If you have sex with them, you're learning stuff about them that the people that they work with will never learn, right? You could meet somebody who's had a job for 5 years and works with those people every day, and you meet for them for one night, and you're going to know all kinds of stuff about that person that people who've known them a lot longer than you don't. And that's assuming you don't talk at all, that you don't have any kind of interaction outside of sex. And the point, while interactions like that do happen, in fact, there's even a whole subculture of people who really like the don't talk, don't do anything, just have sex, and that's it. But that is, although that definitely happens, that's a distinct minority, right? Most of the interactions, you're going to have drinks, you're going to go on a date, you're going to chat, and even if it's just small talk, even if it's just, not real deep conversations, there's a level of informality and familiarity that develops so much quicker and so much faster in an interaction like that than what is normal or typical, in most other situations. It's amazing, right? So I have coworkers that I will, and some of my coworkers are people that, like, I live with them for months, and we work together. We are always together, uh, and yet I will not connect with them as deeply or as totally as with guys that I can meet in a day or two, just because of the nature of at work. It's formal, and we have a job to do, and it's professional, and we have all the professional courtesies. And because we do spend a lot of time together, they do eventually. I learn things about their life and about who they are, and they learn things about my life and who I am. But it's not anywhere near the same level. We don't get naked and jump into bed and start having pillow talk with each other about our hopes and dreams and fears and our inner demons and our, all that stuff. And so, um, and that's with people who, like, I'm working with all the time. Regular people that I might just meet at the store, or acquaintances. People I see at the gym, or restaurants that I frequent, or whatever. That's not. It's a very, very low fraction of those that develop anything past formal. And that's not necessarily bad. Who has the time to have a deep relationship with everyone that they meet? I'm not criticizing that, and that's not to say deeper relationships don't happen, but they happen at far, far less frequency. And I think the term deep relationship is probably not the right term or the best term here. That implies maybe a level of commitment that's not being expressed here. But there's a level of um, informal acquaintance that you end up with a much stronger connection. I mean, literally, like, you can meet someone for 20 minutes and know their sexual kinks, like, their sexual history, a lot about the child. Now, a lot of this is me. I'm very talkative. I like to ask a lot of questions. I like to talk to people about their work. I've learned all kinds of things about what people do for a living, insights into what they do. If they have anything if they know anything about that's pertinent to, like, political discussions or libertarianism, I learn about that. So I've met, city managers and city councilors and um, auditors and politicians and news people, and you know it's just, there's a level of access, right? Like, you could, if you wanted to go and meet your local news anchor, what would how far could you get with them, right? If you saw a news anchor on TV and you'd be like, oh, I want to go hang out, and they probably wouldn't give you the time of day, or they'd give you very polite. You'd have to email them. It'd be very difficult to kind of get anything going. You'd have to really work long term for. But if you're gay and they're gay, you guys can be in a hotel room or in someone's bedroom or out for drinks, like, in a matter of hours or even minutes, and it's like all the personal walls, the personal barriers that we erect, not without good reason, largely, uh, those are surmounted. Like it's I guess a kind of an analogy would be like these apps and the cult and the gay culture circumvent um, a huge proportion of the social barriers that we erect between ourselves and other people in our lives. And again, I'm not saying that that's necessarily a bad thing, and it's not necessarily a good thing that these are totally right. Right? There are definitely costs associated with being um, there are emotional costs, there's physical costs, there's financial costs, but it is a totally different dynamic. And I've seen, and I mean, I could give a lot of examples here, and I live in a peripheral area, right? I don't live in a huge city where there's a ton of people, and I'm not. But if you go to DC, Washington DC, and you open up your Grindr app, almost everyone you meet is going to work for the government or work for some firm or and it's kind of, I mean, I find it nauseating, but there's a hierarchy of how close you are to the president, and so like, well, I work at the House, and then, oh, well, I work at the Senate, and it's like, oh no, I work at the Department of Defense, and then, ooh, I'm in the office of the president, and the thing is, all those people are there, and they're not all going to be interested in everyone, so this isn't like an automatic ticket, but for anyone who is interested in you, um, it's like a beeline to to personal access to them. And so I have a good friend who works in DC in a private company that does a lot of medical research, and he's in his mid 20s and is a high level manager. He manages huge departments, and there are people under him who have been working there much longer than he is, almost as long as he's been alive, 15, 20 years. And they ask him, how did you rise so quickly? How is it that you are at this position? And he laughs and goes, well, I have a great work ethic. I just work very hard. And he does. And he has other, I mean, he's great people skills and everything. But he goes, what I don't tell them is that he can open up his cell phone and he can contact 20 or 30 federal regulators or legislators or attorneys who are more than eager to talk to him, who are more than interested in meeting up with him. And while I'm sure some of them are going to be reluctant to betray corporate secrets or legal secrets or to spout everything about their jobs, they're going to be accessible to him in a way that they are not going to be accessible to a heterosexual equivalent. And so you go to like a nightclub in DC, there's going to be a lot of knowledge, a lot of power, a lot of influence that's there, and a lot of it is available. And so, not all of it, not all the time. And again, it's not to suggest that gay men are going to surrender up all their everything that they know because you gave them a blowjob, but they will tell you all kinds of things, and you will have an access that they won't. And it's very easy for the people who, not, I don't want to say very easy, but it's possible for people who are interested in advancing their careers to kind of use this as a venue. It is actually a very powerful network. The other way I'll describe it is, there's the game 6 seconds. They say everyone is there's you know six barriers of six steps of separation between you and everybody else, right? So if there's somebody in China, they know somebody who knows somebody who knows somebody who knows you. Well, in the gay community, because it's much smaller and because it's so networked, I think that it's more like 1 or 2 degrees of separation. Between me and any other gay person, there's probably 1 or maybe 2 other people between us. And so the network is and it's super integrated, right? So you might have a second cousin who had a coworker and who had a blank, who had a who had another second cousin, and boom, that's the 6 degrees. Here it would be, I dated a guy and then he dated a guy, and the level of integration there is not the same. It's much more integrated, and the stuff that the overlap of what we would be able to relate with each other is not comparable, right? It's different. It's and homosexuals can have all the same overlap that heterosexuals can have, right? We can have the same job. Could have gone to the same schools. We could have liked the same football teams or gone to the same gyms. Like all those are true as well. We could be related, um, but then we can add on top of that uh, a degree of sexual access that's almost certainly not going to be there in the heterosexual networks. It's there to an extent, but not anywhere near the same degree. And so the result is that you have this radically more integrated, um, you might even say incestuous uh, subculture. And again, it it always amazes me, like when I travel, like because of these networks, you will meet the same people over and over again. They'll know that you're there. Whenever I go to DC, oh, you're back in DC. I can travel. I can when I'll drive out to Montana or Wyoming or Denver. Um, I have a pretty good idea where I am. I always know I know where I am. But like, if I just looked at my phone and just looked at my Grindr feed and looked at the guys, I could tell you where I was. I could tell you that I was in Ohio, or that I was in Pennsylvania, or that I was in New Jersey. I could tell you I was in Minnesota. I could tell you I was in Michigan. I could tell you all of those things because it's that integrated. And those people, like, it gives you this level of access that's just unbelievable. So a nice example here. When I went to England last year, and this wasn't even a Grindr. I was in a gay Facebook group, and I said, "Hey, I'm going to go to England," and I already had plans, and I had met someone else in this Facebook group. I had met an English guy, and we had discussed, "Hey, I want to come," and basically he agreed to basically be my tour guide. He met me at the airport. He took me around. He showed me how to get, what was what, where to where. We spent a lot of time together, so it wasn't like I was a stranger in a strange land. I had this, you know, this person who wanted to meet, and I posted in the group, "Hey, I'm going to come to, I'm coming to London," and you get all these messages from people, "Oh yeah, come hang out with us, come hang out with us." So I got firsthand tours of Cambridge and of Oxford, and all over London, and then I was at the British Museum, of course, which was a surreal experience for historical reasons. But while I was there, one of the guys from the Facebook group saw me on Grindr and was actually only a few blocks away. This was really close to where he worked. And he said, "Hey, you must be at the British Museum." I'm like, "Yeah, I am." He's like, "Well, do you want to grab some lunch?" And I was like, "Sure." So we had lunch. And then he goes, "Look, I have to get back to work, but are you free tonight?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I am." He goes, "Well, meet me at the Winston Churchill statue by Parliament, and we can do something fun." So ambiguous what this actually meant. So I went, and I was with my other English friend, and so we went and we were walking around Westminster, and Parliament was closed. It wasn't in session, and so they weren't giving tours. There were guards all the way around it. You couldn't go in. And you're like, "Well, I wonder what he's going to do." So we go meet by the Churchill statue. Our host shows up and he goes, "Hey, well, do you guys want to go to Parliament?" And we were like, "Well, it's closed. You can't go into Parliament. They're not even open." And he goes, "Oh no, there's no problem. I can get you in." So his partner, his boyfriend, was an MP, was in Parliament, and he had a special pass. And so he took us a couple blocks away, not by the main entrance, but on one of the side streets, and he went down, and there was the guy with the bobby hat and all that, and they just let us in, and he took us all the way through Westminster Hall, uh, the House of Lords, the House of Commons, everywhere, and we just had it all. We could do it. I mean, we couldn't do whatever we want. They didn't let us go and sit in the throne, but like we could. It wasn't like we just had access, and it was just there. And this guy, we never even hooked up. He didn't even ask. He didn't say, "Hey, now that I did this, you're gonna come back to my place, and maybe we can, like have blah blah blah." Like, wasn't even spoken of. It was just like a thing, and like, okay, that's fair enough. That's not a big deal. You're getting a nice tour of Parliament. It's kind of a touristy thing. Same thing happened in Iceland, by the way. I got to go to the Blue Lagoon for free. Blue Lagoon is the most touristy, most popular spot that people go. It's There's lots of pools in Iceland, and most of them are better than the Blue Lagoon, and a hell of a lot cheaper because it's about $100 to go there, and it's 20 miles from Reykjavik. And the first time I went to Iceland, I was like, well, I'm not even going to go. And I was almost ready to leave, and I started to feel like, gosh, I'm not going to go. And then when I go home, people are going to ask me about the Blue Lagoon constantly, and I'm just going to say, oh, I didn't go. And I almost was like, I feel like I should go just for the experience, but it's $100. It's probably not worth it. Again, friend was like, "Oh, well, I can get you in for free. I have a friend who works there, and I have free passes." And I was like, "Yeah, but it's 20 miles away. It's fine. I'll give you a ride." So, you know, boom, did it. And like that's a little thing. That's not a big thing, but that is emblematic of a broader level of access, informality, and networking, right? That and then that kind of connects us in a way, right? So you might go on vacation to Iceland, as some of you do, and you might make a friend at a bar. You might meet someone, hey, we had a good time. You're probably not going to sleep with them. You're probably not going to have sex with them. You're probably not going to um, get to know them that well. And so the strength of that connection is not likely to be that strong. Now, it could be strong, right? There could be exceptions. You could go on an epic adventure. They could save your life. You know, these are all things that could possibly happen, but which are extremely unlikely. And so my point is here is not to say that homosexuals have stronger relationships, you know, with everyone, and that heterosexuals can't have stronger relationships or stronger connections, because they certainly can and they certainly do, but they don't get as personal, as strong, as quick as they do with homosexuals. Just if for no other reason than because of the sex. And also because of it is a smaller group, right? So if you had Grindr for straight people, there would be so many people on there that the network integrity couldn't be that strong. They could all be there, but like you're not going to be able to meet them all. You're not being able to get to know them all, and so the dynamic is not going to be the same. And so you know, it's definitely a very different thing, and it's one that I don't even think about that much, but you become kind of conscious of it when if you ever mix socially. So you know, most of the people I know, like my roommate is not gay. People I know at the gym, I don't go to a gay gym. The people I see at jujitsu are not gay. Most of the people I interact with, I don't live in a big gay city. Manchester has a gay population, and I'm familiar with them, but it's not most of the people you meet on a daily basis. Um, when I go to a place like DC or I go to a place like New York, and I meet like a large number of gay people, uh, they act very differently, right? It's a different um, it's a different dynamic. There's kind of an awkward situation this last International Students for Liberty conference. I went to a brunch basically with a group of my gay friends who we all knew each other from Facebook and from Grindr, and you know I hadn't hooked up with all of them, but I'd hooked up with maybe half of them over the years. And we go to brunch, and there's maybe about 10 of us, and we brought one straight guy. There's one guy who wanted to go with. He said, "Hey, I want to go to lunch," you know, and I was like, "I don't know if that's a good idea." And he was like, no, I'll get, you know, they're all libertarians. I'm a libertarian. You know, they all seem like cool guys. You seem cool. I was like, all right. I didn't want to, I felt awkward telling him no. And we go, and it was extremely cringeworthy because the conversation among the faggots is not the type of dinner, you know, table talk that is typically going to happen. Now, I'm not saying there aren't rowdy, you know, explicit heterosexual conversations. There's heterosexual porn. There's heterosexual sex clubs. There's heterosexual this. There's strict blah blah blah. I get it, but you're not going to see that on a Sunday morning at noon. You know, and the thing is like this was just that's the exceptional. Oh, you go to the strip club, you know, once a week or whatever. This is just every day. And again, it wasn't an orgy or anything like that, but just the level of talk, the openness of discussion was. I mean, this guy is not a guy who's normally lost for words. He's a cool guy and everything, but like you could just see him like, whoa, what did I get in here to? Like, what did I get into here? Um, and the bawdiness and the sexual explicit nature. Um, there's problems with that, and I'm sure I'm going to get comments here about that, and some of those are going to be perfectly justified comments. But um, I pointed out to say it's emblematic of something else, that there is a degree of social interaction there and social cohesion there that distinguishes it from most other uh, hetero interactions. Not all. There are hetero interactions that are just as strong, like within your family, if you're on a really tight-knit athletic team, or even certain work, or maybe in the military, right? Again, this is not to say that homosexuality or homosexual communities are the strongest or the only ones that are this integrated. That's not true, but that they are, as on a whole, integrated as a way that on a whole the hetero society is not, and really probably can't be. So there are guys who kind of can make their way to an to a considerable point in just navigating this network, right? Another interesting thing about it is you get integrated in this network as soon as you want to be, and so this wasn't the case with me. I didn't become sexually active till much later. But if you are young now and you're home and you're gay, um, you can plug into this network basically as soon as you can get a phone. And this, the socializing that young gay men have, I think, has got to be just radically different from their heterosexual peers, because they're, I mean, they're having more sex probably. Again, exceptions, right? I know that there are there are high school guys and girls who have a lot of sex. It happens, I get it, but not all of them. In fact, the kind of the cliche, the trope is that most are sexually frustrated most of the time, and I think that that's basically true. Um, but then you look at the homosexual ones, and that's definitely not true. They have as much sex as they want, or as they're able to logistically get their hands on. But I don't mean it just in the sense of hooking up. I mean it in the sense of they're out interacting with men. They're getting to know them. They can find sugar daddies. They can find people who will pay for things. I have friends who, they're not young now, but they tell me when they were 18, 19, they never paid for apartments. They never paid for anything. They didn't have to have a job. They would just go, and these weren't formal, like we signed a contract, but oh yeah, sure, yeah, I can help you out with rent. Oh yeah, I can do this. Oh, hey, let's fly up to my yacht. Let's go out to my boat. Let's, older, wealthier men. That's the coin that they apply with, is they don't have a hot body anymore, but oh, let's go to my beach house and maybe spend the blah blah. So, and even not even that, blatantly. I mean, you almost look at that as like as a type of like prostitution, you could almost say. There's a spectrum on that, and some of it's going to be pretty blatant, and some of it's going to be a lot more innocent or benign or less explicit anyway. Um, but yeah, I mean, I know people who, um, their parents didn't like that they were gay, and would basically take away their phone and say, okay, no more of this. And they would go and get a job just so they could get a prepay phone, just so they could get into this network. Now they're getting in it because they're looking to date and to have sex or whatever, but what they're also doing at the same time is integrating into that network. And so somebody might be a 16-year-old kid at high school, but he's going out and hanging out with men who are 5 years older, 10, college students, older high school students, depending on what the kid likes. He could be seeing people who are twice his age, 20, who are 20, 30, 40, 50 even, and so his peer group, instead of having a peer group that is, all other 16-year-olds or other 17-year-olds or other 18-year-olds, or even in college, other, 20 to 21-year-olds, it's a peer group that extends vertically through chronologically. And good, not all gay guys do that. There are plenty of gay guys who really are mostly only interested in their age group, or, but for those who aren't, like, and even those are going to be interacting to some degree, if only through text, if not through physical meeting, with the full broad range of the homosexual population. So, like even at before they're done with high school, for a lot of, not all, but for a lot, they're already getting, and this is even if this would even be true if they didn't meet anyone, right? Even if they said, I'm not going to meet anyone, they just chat, they're still getting exposed to that network. So instead of being somebody who is only concerned about his ACT scores and the prom or whatever, he's on there and he's talking whatever they want to talk about. You can only imagine, right? So, um, and then once they get into it, like they never really get out, right? You're integrated from then on into a really close. I don't want to say close knit to pretend that there's like necessarily an affinity, right? I'm not saying that all gay guys love each other and we all get along. That's not true, but there is uh, an informality and a knowledge, just a degree of awareness and a degree of integration that I don't think you're going to see other places. And for people who are really interested and who are really ambitious, they can ride this a long way. And you can see people who, in fact, there are certain industries where, and I don't speak from experience here, but there are certain industries where this is the way, right? And this is especially true in entertainment related things, whether it's, actors, musicians, there's now this is not to say that this is the only way to get ahead in these industries, but like the degree to which this is the network that people are moving in is in some cases scandalous. Right. So, um, and I mean, I've talked to guys who are trying to be actors, who are trying to be, and they just go and they can find you can find producers. I'm not even trying to be an actor, and I've found producers. I've had producers of television shows. I mean, I almost forgot. Like a producer for Star Trek Discovery just hit me up on Facebook. I had no idea who he was, no previous interaction. I was like, hey, what's up? And he starts, oh, I just saw a picture. I thought you were cute, and blah 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 blah. And he wasn't looking for a hookup because he wasn't in the United States, and yet, uh, he's like, oh, I just thought you seemed like a cool guy, and blah blah blah. And like all of a sudden we're talking, and like I have no ability to really exploit what he does. There's nothing he can offer me that I really need or want, but like if I was an up and coming actor, who can you imagine what oh well, actually here's some of my headshots, maybe you can talk to casting for me. And you know what, maybe he would. And that's just one guy, and I'm sure if I went to West Hollywood, which I've never been, you can only imagine like how many more people you could potentially network with. So uh, it's definitely there. Now, is it centralized? Is it controlled? Is there a conspiracy in the sense that like gays are getting their orders to? No, I don't think that's the case at all. I think it's just a case of a hyper-connected, hyper-familiar network of the population, and it's funny because it's a cross-sectional in a lot of ways. There's certain industries that are more gay than others. So like flight attendants, Jesus, like it's very. I feel like the majority of flight attendants are gay, but other nurses, doctors, I think are overrepresented. But it's cross-sectional, right? So you can find guys who are doctors, but also guys who are engineers, and guys who are historians, and guys who work construction, and guys who are farmers, and so the network has most of the richness of the rest of society just kind of condensed into a much smaller group. Um, I guess excluding like, and again, I should have qualified. I'm talking about men here. Among lesbians, I don't think you're going to find the same trends because the sexual practices are not analogous, or at least generally analogous, even though there might be specific people where, I mean, there are gays who are not sexually active, right? I've known gays, I've heard of gays who are, you know, lower on the sexual activity spectrum than almost anyone can be, and I'm sure that there are women who aren't. But I've only in my life met one or two women who were even what would be average for gay. And I've met a lot of women, so like you know, there's a bell curve and there's going to be outliers, and that's fine. But like, if you have the average population with that level of activity and it's a smaller population, things get around. And I mean, this is this is true epidemiologically, but it's also true socially, right? So, and the two are not completely unrelated anyway. So, um, yeah. So do with it what you will. This isn't like a warning or I'm not judging this network. There's problems that go with it. There's good things that go with it. I think it's on net probably neutral. I don't know that it affects the lives of anybody else, but it's good to know. Um, you know, if you see a gay person on their phone and they hear the little bleep, like they are connected, you know, and yeah. So anyway, any questions, any people have or stories they have to share, go right ahead, and I will talk to you all another day, probably on something a little bit more traditional.